Oh, nerds.
When I'm painting, I paint from dark to light first off. Let's get a bigger brush. Right? So if I am looking at like the axe on, this is our warrior texture trainer. And if I want to do this axe, I would start with a dark base. So I'm just going to use the same blue black that I just had, right? And what really brings power into edge highlights is to work them as the kind of final touch, the icing on the cake, as it were. And in order for them to work, you've got to build up to that icing, right? So I've got to build these layers along the way. So I've got, my main steel color, maybe, okay? I've got some dark ivory out here. I'm just going to mix my dark ivory into my blue black. Just very quick, maybe that's my edge color for the blade. That's going to be my first highlight. Maybe I'm just going to do this very simply and very quick. So right. So if I have this edge, I've kind of wet blended it up, so don't worry about the blending style or whatever, but I've got now a blue that goes to a mid-tone blue. I could have this kind of stippled in to give me a little bit of texturing highlight up on this area too. I don't want to get too carried away here, but then if I go back and now jump to a much brighter color, I will start doing my edge highlight with the side of the brush along this edge, this sharp edge that you're mentioning, right? I'll do the side of my brush so that I get a very even consistency of line thickness and keep rotating the model around until I pick up that whole line. Okay? So as I'm doing it, the brush is touching at about that angle. Not, it's like maybe 75 degrees to the base.
Yeah.
And I'm dragging it across. And depending on the size of the brush, if you use a tiny brush for this, you'll get a much tighter line. I'm using a number 6, so I get a pretty broad line on that. And I do it before I get to my brightest color because now that edge is kind of a blended highlight to all the other colors that I've had. I can use that same color down on these things. Right. Maybe pick up this little point right there. So maybe along here. Where I can't use the side of the brush, I got to be good with using the tip of the brush to draw that line along the edge so that I don't jam color into the dark recesses. Okay. Mm-hmm. So here I can't really use the side of the brush to do this star shape. So I have to use the tip of the brush and just do short strokes until I cover that line. Okay. Then when I want to go back and do the final highlight, I grab the brightest color, which in this case is just bright ivory by itself. Do the same thing with the side of the brush, but now I want to hold it at a steeper angle. So more like the 90 degree or just a hair off instead of like this, where it put a bigger line on there. Increase that angle so that as I go across the top, I'm not leaving as thick of a line of paint anymore. I'm only touching the very top surface of the model. Right, and do that edge. Okay. Then at the brightest point, let's just say the brightest point is over here. Then I'll go back into my 75 degree angle, a little bit shallower, and hit just that part of the arc where I want it the brightest. In this case. So that it trails off in both directions. So I'll start with my angle very steep again, like 90 degrees over here. And then as I get towards the center of this area where I want it brighter, decrease my angle like this. So my line gets thicker through here, and then increase it back to 90 as it goes off the end. And that makes it blend into the edge, right? So you can't really tell where my original line started and my highlight line started because it tapers off into that original blended color, right? And then I use the tip of the brush and just grab the sections over here where it would be bright again, maybe just right on the face or top of this thing here, and maybe just right up towards the top of this little point on the star. And then again, if I'm bright over here, I'll be bright over here. So I'll just kind of lean a little bit into my bright color towards the right side of this thing. Again, just trying to sketch in and leave that darkness in between. Something like that. Give it a little bit of directional lighting. Because of the shape of this thing, I would probably also come down and do a little bit here. And this is also going to need to be a hard edge highlight, but I don't have an edge. Right? So I've got to use the tip of the brush, and I just kind of in very light, sketchy brush strokes, sketch that in. Very thin, barely touching the model to keep my line thin like that. And then once I get it on there and I know the shape is good, then I can add a little bit more pressure and add a little bit more. By adding more pressure, my line thickens up. And I thicken that line up just like I did up above, just kind of in that one area right here, right here. Right. And you keep the line thin as it goes along the rest of this so that it doesn't look like it's quite as bright of a reflection. Let you push things further into the background the thinner they are. Right? And then thicken your line, regardless if this is metal or cloth or whatever, wherever the light is the brightest, thicken the line a little bit. That gives you more reflective shine there. Gives a little bit more punch to the whole highlight. And there you go. Now we've kind of baked in very quick down and dirtywish.com non-metallic metal. Right? All based on building my color up to that final layer on the highlight. And that edge highlight is what makes it. But you can see, hopefully, that if I just did the base coat and then a bright highlight line, it would start to look like a Tron suit, too contrasty, right? Whereas if we blend up into that line, it gives us a lot better working space. So